Welcome, Susanna. We really appreciate your leadership and taking the time to do this interview with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. As always, we like to begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on, as well as our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We'd like to acknowledge our elders and community stewards whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation. So again, thank you so much for being here. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Susanna Redekop. I'm the engagement manager for the Investment Readiness Program at SEDNET, which is the Canadian Community Economic Development Network. I'm also a co-founder of Freedom Dreams Co-op Education, along with Christine Clark and Aileen Ling. So those are some of the places that I've been and I represent today. Thanks for having me.
That's great. So pretty hefty work. Can you tell us about the origin of your work across Canada? How you're disrupting the ecosystems in Canada?
I suppose in a few different ways. With my work with Freedom Dreams, we do a lot of work within different kinds of communities, specifically within the solidarity economy, within the cooperative sector, supporting the development of cooperatives within different kinds of communities, such as those that are BIPOC, underrepresented, equity denied communities, as well as LGBTQ to IA plus communities, and different kinds of ways in which the cooperative sector doesn't usually show up in Canada. And we also work with a number of different organizations who are doing that kind of work, and we partner and collaborate with them as well. We also have a few projects that we're working on in collaboration with folks in BC with solid state cooperative or solid state community industries, I should say, as well as in Ontario with the Women's Multicultural Resource and Counseling Center of Durham. I also work for SEDNET in the IRP, which is the Investment Readiness Program. It's a federally funded program that supports the investment readiness of different kinds of social purpose organizations. So that can mean anything from cooperatives to social enterprises to small businesses that have different kinds of sustainability measures, support for different equity denied groups within their communities, and doing other kinds of work that have social purpose and impact, and doing that kind of work on the ground. And this is a program from the Regional Initiatives team at SEDNET.
I love that. That's a hefty piece of work. And because you are, associated with different organizations, can you articulate what your personal mission and vision is?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's a good question. I feel like the work that I've been doing and has led to me being here has really been about finding ways to reach different communities that feel underrepresented, and finding different ways to connect folks who are doing great work on the ground in different kinds of communities all throughout Canada, all throughout the so-called Canada that we live in, connecting them with different other groups who are doing similar work and or with resources that they need to be able to be successful. So that's one of the great things I've been able to realize and do with my work with the Investment Readiness Program, has been to connect a number of different groups with funding specifically from the Investment Readiness Program. And now I'm part of a group and a collective that is developing what it might look like to be able to have some more resources to talk about social finance and what that looks like in Canada, what that looks like in different demographics and regions and sectors, since it's a tricky thing that we don't really use the same language to talk about very similar things that I feel like many people are actually doing, but in different groups, it's called different things. It's not really quite recognized that it's the same sort of ethos and values that we have that we're doing in different communities in different ways all throughout this country. And it's also not necessarily recognized that those different activities and groups and organizations could be categorized as social purpose organizations. That's a term that came from ESDC and the federal government to describe a wide range of these different kinds of initiatives. So part of the work that I'm working on that's just emerging right now is to be able to create a resource and demand side social finance info hub that's going to eventually help folks find their path and find ways to reach intermediaries that also will be connected to the social finance fund that just recently got announced, as well as finding out where they lie within the social finance ecosystem and finding ways that resonate with them that can kind of speak to the work they're already doing, and they can recognize that they have a place for themselves within this whole sector.
I love that. It's so true that it covers so much more, than just the not-for-profit, both profit and not-for-profit sectors. So great to hear that. How important is entrepreneurship and innovation to your work?
Ooh, I'd say that that's really at the center of the work that I do and have been working on with the investment readiness program in particular. I really feel like those that are doing work within their communities, they have to be innovative. And it's not a choice sometimes within the communities that we live in. Sometimes it's a matter of survival to be able to find creative ways that folks can come together around different issues to be able to produce and create different ways of supporting each other, because a lot of the time they don't have the resources given to them that they should to be able to find ways that work within their own communities. And entrepreneurship, I think, is such an important piece of it all, because when you live within a system that wasn't built for you, you have to find ways to be able to make it your own and for yourselves. So I feel like that also ties into the work I do with Freedom Dreams, because a lot of the work that we do is to be able to support ideas of cooperation and cooperatives and solidarity economy within different groups and communities and collaboratives together. And a lot of that can look really different than what the Canadian cooperative sector might have set out in some very specific rules and guidelines and bylaws. A lot of the time we don't have time or the resources to be able to go through various different stages, but what we're doing is still cooperative, and how we found these kinds of organizations and collectives is cooperative. So finding ways that can really be validated and be recognized as just as valid as any other incorporated cooperative is also a really important part of the work that I do.
I love that. So what inspires you most about your current work?
I feel like it's really great when we get feedback. It's really great when I get feedback that's positive, and when I have folks that talk to me about recognizing themselves in the work that I'm doing, or seeing that there's something that resonates with them, and seeing that this is something that actually does feel like it's something that represents what they're doing or trying to do, or making those connections is so satisfying when you're like, oh, there's a great group over here. They just need some resources. Oh, there's some great resources over here that someone else has developed. We just need to make that connection happen. And I think there's so many different projects and communities that are really siloed. And when that's the case, it's really difficult to see that there are other opportunities, that there are other possibilities and ways to think outside the box. And so the more we can share those stories, the more we can make those kind of connections, the more strong all of us will be.
Absolutely. Very insightful. What challenges or barriers do you face in your work, and how's your team working to overcome them?
I feel like when the work began to emerge with Freedom Dreams, cooperative education, there were definitely huge barriers in just that there wasn't anything else like what we were doing. There weren't any organizations that were specifically looking at cooperatives from inclusive, from an intersectional lens, from a cultural inclusion lens, including things like ROSCAs, which are rotating savings and credit associations, more commonly known with names like Susu, Boxhand, Chit, Padna, things like that, that are culturally rooted within our different communities, but not recognized as a form of cooperation and cooperatives. And so what led to this kind of work for me was actually doing my master's and including that in my master's research and thesis and project, looking at the different ways in which different groups that are culturally rooted cooperate, and seeing those kind of similarities in lots of different groups, whether they be newcomers and immigrants from different places or indigenous communities as well too, that just have cooperation throughout as a stream within the ways in which they operate and create their societies. So there definitely were a lot of barriers in terms of recognizing that these different forms of cooperation exist and are valid within what we see as cooperatives. But at the same time, I felt like because the work that we were doing was putting a voice to this, we started seeing more and more support kind of popping up, and sometimes in unexpected places. And we end up getting invited to different conferences and invited to do workshops and to really, talk more and more about the work that we were doing and the research I was discovering and the different pieces like that. And so I feel like there definitely has been places that have been created and more encouraged and built than others. And I'd say within the work that I do with SUDNet and the Investment Readiness Program, I think it's an issue of communication sometimes. And I think that it's been really great in seeing the second iteration of the IRP. We have a lot more diverse partners who are specifically looking at different communities to be able to make sure that knowledge is being disseminated about the Investment Readiness Program through places like the National Association of Friendship Centers, for example, which looks at specifically urban and indigenous groups and different kinds of support there, with FFBC, Foundation for Black Communities, and reaching out to different demographics and communities that are part of that foundation. So looking at those different kinds of demographics and making sure the message is getting out there was definitely a different approach. And I think that it's always a challenge to be able to make sure that these kind of messages are reaching enough people, because as someone who is receiving the inquiries that come through the IRP website, there's lots of folks that missed the boat. There's a lot of people in groups that really could use that funding that really, missed the deadlines or weren't quite ready yet when that was happening. So I feel like there's definitely missed opportunities there. And in the recent federal budget, there was not an announcement of the next iteration of IRP 3.0. That's still something that we're hoping to be able to see, because there is definitely a need for more.
Absolutely. There's always room for improvement, no doubt. Do you have a key set of priorities in your work right now?
Let's see, a key set of priorities. I think for now, the work that I'm doing with SUDNet in working on this emerging demand side social finance website, a key set of priorities is trying to make sure that we are able to reach more people, because the website and info hub, we want it to be able to be something that is designed for the demand side and by the demand side. And when I say demand side, I mean social purpose organizations, which can be a range of different things, from social enterprises, for-profit small businesses that have social or environmental missions, not-for-profits, charities, cooperatives, as well as intermediaries themselves and those that actually do provide funding and support for the larger ecosystem of those who need that kind of ecosystem being built, and that support to be able to apply for the different kinds of funding that will be available. So, working with those communities is definitely a priority, and it's something that, it's just an emerging strategy right now that will be further developed as the further weeks and months continue.
Absolutely. How do you feel about the future of entrepreneurship in Canada?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like there's lots of opportunities that are yet to be realized. And I think that there's going to be more and more demand for different kinds of services and resources that speak to a wide range of different kinds of entrepreneurs. And I think that part of the thing will be to be able to make sure that folks who are creating these resources and seeking to reach different kinds of communities are really doing that work to go out into communities to understand what the needs are in different regions, demographics, and sectors to see what it is people actually need. And I think that sometimes it's hard because you don't really know what you need when you're in some beginning stages of, I just have an idea, I want to make it work. But I think a lot of it is needing some professional business training in ways that speak to these communities and is accessible.
Absolutely. And can you paint a picture for us? What is your ultimate goal, and like, what would success look like for you and your colleagues?
Oh, ultimate goals. I feel like goals can always be like moved and flexible because, once we achieve something, it doesn't mean that we're done, right? There's always something more that can be done. There's always more work to do. There's always more people to be able to reach. And I feel like no matter who, you're reaching, there's always going to be somebody else who doesn't know about the work that you do, doesn't know about the things that are out there that they should, and they need to be able to get that message. So I think that in terms of goals, trying to make sure that the work that we do is representative of the communities that we want to support, has input from them and is driven by them. And to also just stay flexible because things change all the time. That's part of, the beauty of life, that things are adaptable in that kind of way. So I think that being able to, be that kind of flexibility, have that kind of flexibility, is really important.
Absolutely. I thank you for sharing all of that. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our community?
I think that in terms of the work that is, emerging, I think just like ask questions, continue to push boundaries, and don't be afraid of the limits that are there. Don't be afraid of some things that, may be standing in your way. Sometimes if there's a blockage in your way, it just creates an environment for you to be able to think outside the box. And I feel like our communities are really good at doing that. And we've had to do that to be able to continue to move forward. And that kind of innovation, entrepreneurship, these are skills that we have within us to be able to think and imagine differently. And that's really the key of it, is to be able to have the confidence to be able to know that even if you don't know the answer is yet, that's okay. If something you've tried doesn't work, that's okay. Keep going and keep trying and see what works. Don't be afraid to let go of what doesn't, and try to find more support for yourself and your communities to be able to know that you're not alone and there's others there that want to support you, and probably have other things that you can exchange. If someone else is providing some resources for you, I'm sure there's something else that you can also provide for them as well too, because reciprocity is also one of the pieces that's going to continue moving us all forward in ways that make sense for our communities and ways that are sustainable.
Absolutely. Heavy on the reciprocity. That's how we're definitely going to get this work done. So I love your closing thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate your time today, Susanna, and your remarkable leadership. We definitely want to champion the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. So we just want to close the way we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on, as well as our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We want to acknowledge all the elders and community stewards whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation. So again, thank you so much, Susanna. Thank you to our viewers and listeners today.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.